Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome into this brand new edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast here on YouTube. As always, I'm your host, Andy Herman, and of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Got a interesting topic that I want to go over today. I wanted to take a look back at that 2019 coaching class, which of course brought the Green Bay Packers Matt LaFleur. It seems like Matt LaFleur is starting to get the recognition that he so incredibly deserves. He has been nothing short of fantastic so far in his short career in Green Bay. We will see if, over time, maybe there's more adversity and things like that. Of course, it's never going to be smooth sailing forever, but what he has done so far as coach of the Green Bay Packers has been nothing short of phenomenal. I know maybe that's a little bit premature to say. Maybe you have to get a Super Bowl win before you can say that, but he's only had one opportunity to win a Super Bowl. He came at least pretty darn close, all things considered, getting to an NFC championship in his very first year. So I've been nothing but impressed, and it's everything. It's not just his scheme. It's how he leads the team. It's how he handles the media. It's how he, is very aggressive within the framework of the game. It's how he manages time. Like, you can't look at anything that Matt LaFleur does right now and be like, man, we have a major red flag. Maybe some of the adjustments after halftime as defenses adjust to his offense a little bit. Interestingly enough, I thought he did a really nice job of that in 2019. I think in 2020, maybe it's taken a small step back, but at the same token, they haven't had to do a ton of that either. And a lot of times it's, they have a lead and, they're just trying to get through the game and things like that. So overall, I think Matt LaFleur has just done a tremendous job, and I don't think too many people are going to argue against that. But wanted to take a look back, wanted to take a look at the coaches that, Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy and the whole gang brought in to actually do interviews with, the coaches that were hired that year, and then even taking a look at the coaches that were hired this year to see, all right, did Green Bay, not take a look at a coach maybe that they should have. I don't think anyone's, going to be too upset that the Packers ended up with Matt LaFleur, but still interesting to look back and see how that process went. So let's go through the people that they did interview first. Number one on the list, Jim Caldwell. So what has Jim Caldwell done since the Packers interviewed him? Well, he ended up getting the assistant head coach and quarterbacks coach position and title with the Miami Dolphins, which the Dolphins have been pretty darn good, all things considered, over the course of the last couple seasons. They've overachieved. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. Tough to say how much impact Jim Caldwell has had. Although if you look at Matt Patricia recently being fired, you go back and look at the last couple decades of Detroit Lions football, about the only positive at all were the Jim Caldwell seasons. So I'm really interested to see if Jim Caldwell gets another chance to be a head coach in the league. He's had some success in his position with the Dolphins. You look back and he's had more success than any of the Lions coaches, and it has really been the only person that's been able to get anything out of that Detroit Lions franchise. So you wonder if he gets maybe a shot somewhere else. But an interesting interview, and certainly Green Bay made the right decision with going with Matt LaFleur over Jim Caldwell. The next interview, Chuck Pagano, who ended up being the Bears defensive coordinator and has been a little bit maligned recently for his play calling and what he's done in Chicago. And Green Bay just had their way with Chuck Pagano this last week. So definitely was not the way to go, and Green Bay made the wise decision not moving forward with Chuck Pagano. How about Joe Philbin? Now, this was probably an interview that was done more out of courtesy than actually having an interview to see if he could become the head coach of the team. That's no disrespect to Joe Philbin. He did a lot of great things for the Packers franchise, but it just seemed highly unlikely that they were ever going to go in that direction. He actually sat out of football in 2019. Maybe he was an advisor somewhere and it just wasn't listed. But as far as I know, did not coach in 2019. And then this year he became the Cowboys offensive line coach, of course, when Mike McCarthy went to Dallas. And Joe Philbin, kind of his right-hand man for a long time, went with him and became the offensive line coach there, as Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator, and that position was already taken. So Philbin stuck with him. The Cowboys have had a really rough season, especially along the offensive line. No fault of Joe Philbin's. They've been massively beat up. They've got Terrence Steele and undrafted free agents, and it's been a nightmare. Certainly has not been an easy task for Joe Philbin, but again, certainly the right decision to make, not going with Joe Philbin as head coach. The next one, the favorite going into the search was Josh McDaniels. He has remained the Patriots offensive coordinator over the course of the last couple seasons, still has not taken a head coaching job. Things didn't work out perfectly in Tom Brady's last season offensively. Some of that was on Brady. Some of that was seemingly just on the Patriots overall. It seemed like that relationship was ready to come to an end. They had a little bit of success with Cam Newton to start the season. They basically had to just go power running offense and use Cam Newton as a pseudo, running back at times, just like almost a power quarterback, and run power football. They don't have a true quarterback at the position right now. That's, I'm not trying to disrespect Cam here, who had an MVP and, a tremendous career, but he's just a shell of himself right now. Josh McDaniels and that offense haven't had as much success. I think a lot of people, it was really split, right? A lot of people really wanted Josh McDaniels. A lot of people wanted nothing to do with Josh McDaniels. There was no in between. I think it was very wise for Green Bay to stay away, even if he's had, a little bit of a resurgence over the course of the last 4 or 5 years overall as offensive coordinator of the Pats. The next one is interesting, really the only one that has had any level of success, and that's Brian Flores, the Dolphins head coach. I mentioned the Dolphins earlier when I discussed Jim Caldwell. Brian Flores has by far and away exceeded all expectations in Miami. Remember, last year they traded away everybody, and I mean everybody. Laramie Tunsil was gone. They traded Kenny Stills. They churned that roster completely and really brought it to its bones. A lot of people expected them to have a season like the Jets are having this year, like an 0-16 type season. They won a handful of games a season ago that people were not expecting them to win. They overachieved, and then this year they come out. They're a winning football team. They have a chance to go to the playoffs. They're ahead of schedule. They have a young quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. Who knows what they have in him? It's still a ways away, but they are a franchise that's seemingly on the rise, and Brian Flores deserves a ton of credit. Not that you would want him over Matt LaFleur, but he's really the only other one on this list that's had a level of success so far coaching, at least as a head coach. The next two, Dan Campbell and Pete Carmichael, two of the offensive minds in New Orleans. Dan Campbell, the assistant head coach and tight ends coach. Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator. Both of these have had a lot of success with the Saints offense. They've done a lot of unique things with Taysom Hill. People's mileage may vary a bit with what they think of the Taysom Hill experiment, but they've been creative. I don't think anyone can take anything away from them there. They've learned a lot under Sean Payton. Nobody's, offered either of them head coaching jobs either in 2019 or in 2020. So they're still in their current positions, but will be interesting to see if either of those two get head coach looks down the road. The next one, Todd Monken, who in 2019 became the Browns offensive coordinator, was subsequently let go as that entire staff with Freddie Kitchens and everyone else was let go. And then this year he became the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach of the University of Georgia, who's having a 6-2 season. But tough to compare the current head coach, Matt LaFleur of the Packers, to now an offensive coordinator at the college level. Todd Monken has certainly seen his stock go down a little bit. And again, Green Bay made the wise choice there not to hire Todd Monken. And then the last one, not named Matt LaFleur, is, of course, Adam Gase. And, of course, just a nightmare that would have been. I know a lot of people at the time really liked Adam Gase, thought that maybe he was the way to go. Man, from the word go, that introductory press conference with Adam Gase in New York was weird to say the least. They had a really disappointing season, although they got some wins towards the end of the year, have not been able to develop Sam Darnold. They've not won a game yet this season. The writing's on the wall. He's going to get fired, and that would have just been a huge setback and a nightmare for the Packers had they hired Adam Gase. And then, of course, the only other one that they interviewed was Matt LaFleur. It was interesting when Mark Murphy came out to introduce Matt LaFleur as the head coach. He made a kind of a candid comment. He said they interviewed, 10 candidates, and he basically said they weren't impressed with the rest of them, and Matt LaFleur blew their socks off. But it was really interesting that they added in, they weren't impressed with any of the others. I guess outside of Brian Flores, that makes sense. None of these guys have had a ton of success, either in the NFL, college, etc., up until this point. So an interesting study in who the Packers hired and didn't hire going back. They obviously made the right call. Now, to be fair, Matt LaFleur had the benefit of Aaron Rodgers and a really good football team, and Brian Gutekunst went out, got Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner. They had a couple couple first round picks. They get Elton Jenkins in round 2, so he came into a pretty good situation. But no question, they got that call right, and we knew that going into this conversation. But it's interesting to look back at who they interviewed as well. Taking a quick look at who the other head coaches were that were hired that year. Cliff Kingsbury of the Cards, certainly having some success now. Would have been a totally different offense for Aaron Rodgers. Would have been interesting to see if they would have went in that direction. Again, he didn't even get an interview with the Packers. 11-15-1 so far for Cliff Kingsbury. The Browns hired Freddie Kitchens, their interim coach, the year before. He didn't even make it through his first season. He got fired last year after the season was over. He went 6-10 in his season as the Browns coach, and then was again subsequently fired. Vic Fangio for the Broncos is 11-16 so far, and he is on the hot seat in Denver. It sounds like he's going to stay, but there's a chance, depending on how the rest of the season goes, that he could be on the way out. Bruce Arians, 14-14 with the Tampa Bay Bucks, having a little bit better season this year than last year with Tom Brady at quarterback, but I think people are still not feeling like he is meeting expectations with what was expected with that Tampa Bay team this season. I think he's got a little bit of a leash there, but it'll be interesting to see what the rest of the season brings for that Tampa Bay team. He's getting a lot of flack right now for not using a ton of motion. Again, the Jets hired Adam Gase. He's been 7-20 and, of course, winless this season. The Bengals hired Zach Taylor, 4-20-1. That's a tough franchise to coach. We know that, but that is not a good mark. He could be on the way out in Cincinnati. Brian Flores, I talked about already. He got the job with Miami. He's 12-15 so far in his career in Miami. Again, exceeding expectations, but still a losing record. And then there's Matt LaFleur, who's 21-6, the only one with a winning record of anyone hired in 2019. The only one that's been to the playoffs. The only one that for sure is looking like they're going to go to the playoffs this year, although Tampa Bay is very likely as well. And a 22-7 mark overall, including playoffs. Just a tremendous start to Matt LaFleur's career. And then let's take a quick look at the coaches that were hired in 2020. Maybe Green Bay could have looked at some of these. It's always tough to tell, some of these coaches that are going to be up and coming a year later. The Giants this year hired Joe Judge. Some level of success. Their defense is playing really well right now. They might even get the playoff spot simply because it's the NFC East, but I don't think anyone's pining for Joe Judge in Green Bay. Kevin Stefanski's had a really nice start to the Browns, his Browns career. 8-3 so far, same record as the Packers this year, arguably with less talent. So kudos and tip of the cap to Kevin Stefanski. There were some people that had his name on the list, going back to last year, but really struggled in 2018. I don't think he was a legitimate candidate for most teams in 2019, but he was a really nice hire so far for Cleveland. Matt Rule, somewhat similarly, would not have been an option in Green Bay. He was still coaching Baylor at the time. Very unlikely that he would have made the jump a year sooner. But he's had a nice start to his Panthers career. I think, again, exceeding expectations, if even still with a losing record. The Washington football team hired Ron Rivera. Green Bay would not have been able to hire him in 2019 because he was still the head coach of the Carolina Panthers at the time. And then, of course, Mike McCarthy, who they, of course, were not going to bring in, who they just fired at the time. So really, you look at it, 3 names on this list over the course of the last 2 seasons who've had any level of success. Matt LaFleur, Kevin Stefanski, and then Brian Flores. And then to a little bit of a lesser extent, we're starting to see a little bit of success with Bruce Arians in Tampa and Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona as well. So easily, the Packers made the best decision with Matt LaFleur. They seem to have their franchise head coach for the foreseeable future. Everything's been coming up aces, and really kudos to Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball, whoever was all involved in that coaching process. They got it right. They hit it out of the park, and they got the face of the Packers franchise from a coaching standpoint, again, for the foreseeable future. That's going to do it for me. Thanks, as always, for joining me. Make sure to check out Ben Fennell and I. We did a full about hour-long Pack-A-Day podcast, which, again, you can get wherever you find your favorite podcast. So I am always smarter after talking to Ben. I think you'll really enjoy that episode, so make sure to check that out. You can check back here tomorrow. I'll be right back here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.